soon as Wendy hops up here in my lap, we're going to read it. Here we go. Close to a large forest there lived a woodcutter with his wife and his 2 children. The boy was called Hansel, and the girl was called Gretel. They were always very poor and had very little to live on. And there came a time when there was a famine in the land. That meant there was no food. And there was no way to buy bread. One night, while he lay in bed worrying over his troubles, the woodcutter sighed and he said to his wife, who was a stepmother to the children, "What's to become of us? How are we going to feed our poor children when we have nothing for ourselves?" "I'll tell you what, husband," answered the woman. "Tomorrow morning we will take the children out quite early into the thickest part of the forest. We will light a fire, give each of them a piece of bread. Then we will go to our work and leave them alone. They won't be able to find their way back, and so we shall be rid of them." "Oh, honey, we couldn't do that," said the man. "I could never find it in my heart to leave my children alone in the forest. The wild animals would soon tear them to pieces." "What a fool you are," she said. "Then we must all 4 die of hunger. You may as well plane the boards for our coffins at once." She gave him no peace until he consented. "But I grieve over the poor children all the same," said the man. The 2 children could not go to sleep for hunger either, because they had heard what their stepmother had said to their father. Gretel wept bitterly and said, "It's all over with us now." "Be quiet," said Hansel. "Don't cry. I'll find some way to get out of it." When their parents had gone to sleep, Hansel got up. He put on his little coat and opened the door and slipped out. The moon was shining brightly, and the white pebbles around the house shone like newly minted coins. Hansel stooped down and put as many into his pockets as they would hold. Then he went back to Gretel and said, "Take comfort, little sister, and go to sleep. God won't forsake us." And then he went to bed again. At daybreak, before the sun had risen, the woman said, "Get up, you lazy bones. We're going to go out in the forest to get some wood." She gave them each a piece of bread and said, "Here is something for your dinner, but don't eat it before then, for you're going to get nothing else." Gretel put the bread under her apron, for Hansel had the stones in his pockets when they all started out for the forest. When they'd gone a little way, Hansel stopped and looked back at the cottage, and did the same thing again and again. His father said, "Hansel, what are you stopping to look back at? Take care and put your best foot forward." "Oh, father," said Hansel, "I'm looking for my white cat. It is sitting on the roof wanting to say goodbye to me." "Little fool, that's no cat, that's the morning sun shining on the chimney," said the mother. But Hansel had not been looking at the cat. He had been dropping a pebble on the ground each time he stopped. When they reached the middle of the forest, their father said, "Now, children, pick up some wood. I want to make a fire to warm you." Hansel and Gretel gathered the twigs together and soon made a huge pile. Then they lit the fire, and when it blazed up, the woman said, "Now lie down by the fire and rest yourselves while we go and cut some more wood. When we have finished, we'll come back and get you." Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire, and when dinner time came, they each ate their little piece of bread. And they thought their father was quite near because they could hear the sound of an axe. It wasn't an axe, though, but the branch which the man had tied to a dead tree, which blew backwards and forwards against it. They sat there so long that they got tired. Then their eyes began to close, and they were soon fast asleep. When they woke up, it was dark. Gretel began to cry, "How shall we ever get out of the woods?" But Hansel comforted her and said, "Wait a little while until the moon rises, and then we shall soon find our way." When the full moon had risen, Hansel took his little sister Gretel's hand, and they walked on, guided by the pebbles which glittered like newly coined coins. They walked the whole night, and at daybreak they found themselves back at their father's cottage. They knocked at the door, and when the woman opened it and saw Hansel and Gretel, she said, "You bad children! Why did you sleep so long in the wood? "We thought you did not mean to come back any more." But their father was very happy, for it had been really hard on him to leave his children behind alone. Not long afterwards they were again in the great destitution, which means they didn't have anything. And the children heard the woman at night in bed say to their father, "We have eaten of everything again but half a loaf, and then it'll be the end of everything. The children must go away. We shall take them farther in the forest this time so they won't be able to find their way back. There is nothing else to be done." The man took it much to heart and said, "We had better share our last crust with the children." But the woman would not listen to a word he said. She only scolded and reproached him. Anyone who once says A must also say B, and as the father had given him the first time, he had to do it again. The children were again wide awake, and they heard what was said. When the old woman went to sleep, Hansel again got up, meaning to go out and get some pebbles. But the woman had locked the door, and he couldn't get out. But he consoled his little sister and said, "Don't cry, Gretel. Go to sleep. God will help us." In the early morning the woman made the children get up and gave them each a piece of bread, but it was much smaller than the last time. On the way to the forest, Hansel crumbled it up in his pocket, and stopped every now and then to throw a crumb onto the ground. "Hansel, what are you stopping to look about you for?" said his father. "I'm looking for my dove which was sitting on the roof, and wants to say good-bye to me," answered Hansel. "Little fool," said the woman, "there is no dove. It is the morning sun shining on the chimney." Nevertheless, Hansel kept strewing the crumbs from time to time on the ground. The woman led the children far, far into the forest, where they had never been in their lives before. Again they made a big fire, and the woman said, "Stay where you are, children, and when you are tired you may go to sleep for a while. We're going farther on to cut more wood, and in the evening when we finish we will come back and fetch you." At dinner time Gretel shared her piece of bread with Hansel, for he had crumbled his upon the road. Then they went to sleep, and the evening passed, but no one came to fetch the poor children. It was quite dark when they woke up, and Hansel cheered his little sister. "Wait a bit, Gretel, till the moon rises, then we can see the breadcrumbs which I've scattered to show us the way home." But when the moon rose, they started and found no breadcrumbs, for all of the thousands of birds in the forest had picked them up and eaten them. Hansel said to Gretel, "We shall soon find the way," but they couldn't find it. They walked all night, and all the next day from morning till night, but they couldn't get out of the woods. They were very hungry, for they had nothing to eat but a few berries which they found. They were so tired that their legs would not carry them any farther, and they lay down under a tree and went to sleep. When they woke in the morning, it was the third day since they left their father's house. They started to walk again, but they only got deeper and deeper into the woods, and if no help they must perish. At noon they saw a beautiful snow-white bird sitting on a tree. It sang so beautifully that they stood still to listen to it. When it stopped, it fluttered its wings and flew down to them. They followed it until they came to a little cottage, and on the roof of it, when they got quite near, they saw that this little house was made of bread, and was roofed with cake. The windows were transparent sugar. "Here is something for us," said Hansel. "We will have a good meal. I will have a piece of the roof, Gretel, and you can have a piece of the window. It'll be nice and sweet." Hansel reached up and broke off a piece of the roof to see what it tasted like. It tasted good. Gretel went to the window and nibbled at that. A gentle voice called out from within, "Nibbling, nibbling like a mouse, who is nibbling at my house?" The children answered, the wind doth blow from heaven to earth below." And they went on eating without disturbing themselves. Hansel, who had found the roof very good, broke off a large piece for himself, and Gretel pushed a whole round pane out of the window and sat down on the ground to enjoy it. All at once the door opened, and an old woman, supporting herself on a crutch, came hobbling out. Hansel and Gretel were so frightened that they dropped what they held in their hands. But the old woman only shook her head and said, "Ah, dear children, who brought you here? Come in and stay with me. You will come to no harm." She took them by the hand and led them in the house. A nice dinner was set before them, pancakes and sugar, milk, apples, and nuts. After this she showed them two little white beds in which they crept, and they felt as if they were in heaven. Although the old woman appeared to be so friendly, she was really a wicked old witch who was on the watch for children, and she had built this candy house on purpose to lure them to her. Whenever she could get a child into her clutches, she cooked it and ate it. Ugh,
What?
the kids, and she would consider it a good feast. Witches have red eyes, but they can't see very far. But they have noses like animals, and can scent the approaching of human beings. When Hansel and Gretel came near her, she laughed wickedly to herself and said scornfully, "Now that I have them, they shan't escape me." She got up very early in the morning, before the children were awake, and when she saw them sleeping with their beautiful rosy cheeks, she murmured to herself, "They will be dainty morsels." She grabbed Hansel with her bony hand and carried him off to a little stable, where she locked him up behind a barred door. He might shriek as loud as he liked, but no one could hear him. Then she went to Gretel and shook her till she woke, and cried, "Get up, little lazy bones! Fetch me some water, and cook something nice for your brother. He's in the stable and has to be fattened. When he is nice and fat, I will eat him." Gretel began to cry bitterly, but it was no use. She had to obey the witch's orders. The best food was now cooked for poor Hansel, but Gretel got nothing but the shells of crawfish. The old woman hobbled to the stable every morning and cried, "Hansel, put your finger out for me to feel how fat you are." Hansel put out a knuckle bone, and the old woman, whose eyes were too dim to see, thought it was his finger, and she was very much surprised that he did not get fat. See, he wasn't putting his finger out, he was putting out a bone of something he'd eaten before. Okay? And she was trying to feel his finger to see if he was getting fatter, and she thought she was, but she was really just feeling this bone. And it never got any fatter. When 4 weeks had passed, Hansel was still thin, and she became very impatient and would wait no longer. "All right, Gretel," she cried, "bustle along and get me the water. Fat or thin, tomorrow I'm going to kill Hansel and eat him." Oh, this poor little girl grieved. As she carried the water, the tears streamed down her cheeks. "Dear God, help us. If only the wild animals in the forest had eaten us, at least we would have died together." "You may spare your lamentations, they will do you no good," said the old witch. Early in the morning, Gretel had to go out and fill the kettle with water, and then she had to kindle a fire and hang the kettle over it. "We will bake first," said the old witch. "I have heated the oven and kneaded the dough." She pushed poor Gretel towards the oven and said, "Crawl in and see if it's properly heated. Then we'll put the bread in." She meant, when Gretel had gone in, to shut the door and roast her. But Gretel saw her intention and said, "I don't know how to do it. How am I supposed to do it?" "Stupid goose," said the witch. "The opening is big enough. You can see that I could do it myself." She hobbled up and stuck her head in the oven. But Gretel gave her a push, which sent the witch right in, and then she banged the door and bolted it. "Oh, oh!" The witch began to howl horribly, but Gretel ran away and left the wicked witch to perish miserably. Gretel ran as fast as she could to the stable. She opened the door and cried, "Hansel, we're saved! The old witch is dead!" Hansel sprang out like a bird out of a cage when the door set open. How happy they were! They fell on each other's necks, and they kissed each other and danced about for joy. As they had nothing more to fear, they went into the witch's house, and in every corner they found chests full of pearls and precious stones. "These are better than pebbles," said Hansel as he filled his pockets. Gretel said, "I must take something home with me too," as she filled her apron. "But now we must go," said Hansel. "We need to get out of this enchanted woods." Before they had gone very far, they came to a great piece of water. "We can't get across it," said Hansel. "I see no stepping stones, and there's no bridge." "And there's no boats either," answered Gretel. "But there is a duck swimming. It will help us if we ask it," said Hansel. "Little duck that cries quack, quack. Here, Gretel, and here Hansel stand. Quickly take us on your back. No path nor bridge is there at hand." The duck came swimming towards them, and Hansel got on its back and told his sister to sit on his knee. "No," said Gretel, "it will be too heavy for the duck. He must take us over one after the other." The good creature did this, and when they got safely over and walked for a while, the wood seemed to grow more and more familiar to them, and at last they saw their father's cottage in the distance. They began to run, and rushed inside, where they threw their arms around their father's neck. The man had not had a single happy moment since he had left his children in the woods, and in the meantime the mean stepmother had died. Gretel shook her apron and scattered the pearls and precious stones all over the floor, and Hansel added handful after handful out of his pockets. And so all their troubles came to an end, and they lived together as happily as possible. The end. What'd you say? You want to hear it? Did you want to say anything before we finish the tape? Did you like the story? What was the best part? Was it when Gretel pushed the witch in the cedar rumpus into the oven? Was the stepmother very nice?
No.
Was their father nice?
Yes.
I wonder why he left him in the woods, though. It didn't make him feel good, did it? Well, let's listen to the story now.
Oh, they left them in the woods
Why?
because they had no food.
They had no food, did they? Well, fortunately, those big bad animals didn't find them. It was bad luck that the witch found them, because they almost got in trouble. You remember, what did Hansel stick out when the witch said, "Stick your finger out"? Did he stick his finger out?
He put a bone out.
Yeah. So when the witch felt that bone, did it get fat? What happened?
He was still skinny.
Right. Okay, let's listen to the record.